I hope you all are safe and taking care of yourself. A warm welcome to all on behalf of Rishihood University. It makes me really happy telling you all that it is a new university which will start off this year with its degree program. And we have all put in our hearts and souls to it in bringing about an impact in the society in all ways possible. With School of Creativity, which is one of its kind in the country and goes the extra mile to create an impact and touch lives. I take pride in bringing this amazingly insightful session from the School of Creativity for you all to understand the intricacies of the field of automobile designing from an amazing person who has joined us today from the UK. Feel free to leave your queries in the chat to us, and we shall try to get back to maximum of questions. I would now hand it over to Professor Manika Walia, who is amazingly heading the School of Creativity as the Dean, to introduce the guest of honor for the day and proceed with this exciting session. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Aishwarya. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's session with our man, Pratap, Vice President, Global Tata Motors. Pratap has been instrumental for the implementation of the new design language at Tata Motors. With his rich global experience, he is the person behind all the successful and important game-changing projects. Thank you, Pratap, and a gracious welcome for accepting our invitation and speaking to our audience. Welcome. So taking this forward, Pratap, I and audience, I think we are very eagerly waiting to hear your journey from NID days to Royal College of Art, London, and now where you are. All your ups and downs, and what exactly inspired you to be into automobile sector?
So am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yeah. So thank you, Manika, and thank you to the Rishihood University. I'm actually honored that you're honored. I'm happy to be here, and this has taken some time coming. I'm sorry about that. Even while we're working from home, we seem to have become busier. I don't know how and why that has happened.
Yeah,
but yes,
it's a challenging thing to work from home, and remote working is pretty challenging. I agree with you.
Yeah. So, but like I said again, thank you for having me, and most happy to share this journey with you and whoever else is on this call. I think the journey has been a long, eventful one. And Manika, I like sharing it because we didn't, when we were in college in the 90s in NID, we didn't really have a chance to listen to these journeys, especially from someone in India in automotive, because the field itself was so nascent at that point. Now, having graduated sort of 20 to 23 years ago, one has therefore built a little bit of a story, which I would therefore like to share. If it inspires, your younger sort of students today, or it inspires anyone else, because there is a little bit of a story, and good or bad, that's for you to judge. But I certainly, have had an interesting journey. So sharing that, is something I do with pleasure.
Sure.
So tell me how you would like to take it. Is someone going to move the slides, or?
Yes, so we will show which you already have, and actually as and when you keep letting us know, we'll keep switching over the slide.
Okay. So if everyone can see, I just thought, like I said, it's obviously I've been living abroad now for over 20 years, but you're always an Indian.
Always an Indian, always heart, absolutely.
Yeah. At heart, in spirit, in our thought. So that's why I actually put this there. I don't say British designer. I say Indian designer because that's where the upbringing, the education, my value base comes from. So the story is, about what it takes to go from, yeah, next. So, from the car to on the left, which is of course the Indica, came out in 97. And what it takes to go from that car to the car you have on the right, which is the Tiago. And that's actually the journey, because the car on the left is what inspired me to join the company, which allowed me to do the car on the right. So in between that is actually the entire journey, or what it takes to go from a sketch on paper to delivering a car in sheet metal that people buy. So from a sheet of paper to a sheet of steel, there's also a journey and a story in that. And that's actually the industrialization story, the real hard work that happens in design studios to convert what's on the left to the right. So there's two stories. One is, of course, the Indica to the Tiago, and then from paper to sheet metal. Is that it's so pliable, it's such a great process. Actually, clay modeling is a part of the design process. It is not the outcome. A lot of people think that you've designed something and the clay model is like a 3D printout of that. It's not. We actually design the car in the clay, like a textile designer would do while experimenting with a piece of fabric, or like a graphic designer would do by just doodling on a piece of paper. A clay model is actually part of the process. Therefore, this whole debate about should we do it or not is very different. We use clay models and we use digital processes simultaneously today, and I'll touch upon that a little later, where I talk about going from a sheet of paper to a sheet of steel. This iterative process between clay and digital is very, very important. Another thing to remember, when a car design is signed off by the managing director and the executive committee, it's usually a decision which involves around 1,000 crore investment. Please think of that again, 1,000 crores for one car. It's very difficult for them to sign that off on the basis of a picture on a screen. However well it's rendered, how much ever you turn it around on the computer and all of that, they really need to see something physical to sign that off. It's a huge amount of money, and it involves a lot of people's lives. I mean, so if you're doing 2 or 3 cars a year, you're talking about investments of upwards of 2,500 crores. A company like Tata Motors employs 25,000 people. All their futures depend on that one design decision. So, this is very, very important. That's why I insist on showing full-size clays to the management when we sign off. So I hope that answers, but we can always come back to that. Anyway, so from NID, I had another key moment, a company called Piaggio, which makes famously the Vespa scooters. They contacted me and said that, would you like to come to our headquarters in Italy? I, of course, didn't know any Italian. I had nothing to lose. Remember this, when you're young, you have very, very little to lose. You don't have a mortgage. You don't have a girlfriend. Even if you have, you actually don't. And I took the chance. I got onto the AZ 777 from Bombay to Milan. And I landed in a city called Town. No, if you can just go back. I landed in a small town of 20,000 people on a Sunday afternoon called Pontedera. Now, anyone who knows Italy, the worst day to come to Italy or arrive in Italy is actually on a Sunday afternoon. And this is what the streets looked like. There wasn't a soul in sight. So you don't know the language. There's nobody, who you can talk to or see. But you end up in this place and you have to go to work on the Monday. And this is the kind of confidence you must have in your ability. So when you graduate, be sure you're the master of your game. The great thing about a company like Piaggio was that it had a over 70, 80-year history, and it had this wonderful museum right next to where the design studio was. This is something great about the Europeans. They really treasure and value their heritage. So when I joined the company, I spent almost every afternoon walking around, this amazing museum, trying to really understand what the company has done. Because if you don't understand history, you can't be a part of shaping the future. This is very, very important. Respect the history of whatever company you're in or whatever field you work in, because only then can you move that field forward. So I would go to this school called Piaggio, and yeah, you got thrown in at the deep end. You started to learn Italian because that's the only thing you could do. There you see every single model so lovingly maintained. Everything had a tag, everything was beautifully preserved. And this is every single model they had made up until I was there. So they obviously continued even after I left. Carry on. So yeah, this is the first project they gave me, which was they thought India is this really backward country. So we'll take the Lambretta and we'll sell it there with a new engine. And this was the first project I got to try and do something to this to make it look a little more modern. I'm talking about 98, 98, yeah. And I took a look at this and said, you guys must be crazy because this is not going to sell. And of course, one thing led to the other, and we didn't eventually produce this terrible scooter. It's got a lot of great memories, but it wasn't relevant for the turn of the century. So sometimes you must take a stand, and that's where that India factor came in. I knew if the company went with a product like that, they would fail. And as they say, you only get one chance to make the first impression. If your first impression is that, then whatever you do as a company after that, you cannot shake it off. Please remember, the first impression is probably the only lasting one. Anyway, I had a great opportunity to work on multiple projects. Gilera was one brand they owned, very, very storied brand. Please carry on. We did I did some scooters for them. This went on to become one of the largest selling scooters in its segment. It's called the Gilera Runner. Incredible project. Then another little scooter, 50cc, called the Energy. Italians work in side views. This is because of their architectural heritage and background to design. So, I really learned how to make precise side views in Italy, actually. That was the final product which came out. The Energy, amazing little scooter. Carry on. Then a new category we created, which was a scooter, but looked like a motorcycle. You could keep the helmet into where the fuel tank actually is. It was called the DNA. Carry on. But again, side views critical because lots of the modelers would use your side view, which we made in full size, to actually start making the model. And again, the learning there from the modelers was amazing. They moved their hands in a certain way. And if the movement of the hand was unnatural, they would say, look, Pratap, maybe there's something wrong with the surface. So, going back to this physical interaction, a physical model tells you many, many things, even where you're going wrong. So while you design something on paper, it's the 3D which actually counts in our field. Carry on. Okay, then the key moment 4, I applied for a scholarship, INLAC scholarship, and I got into the Royal College of Art. Would I pass up on that opportunity? No way. So I actually just stay on that. Sorry. Yeah, I took the chance. I left my job in Italy. It was a great life, believe me. But sometimes you have to take the risk and restart. Don't get complacent in whatever you're doing. That's the other sort of learning. So I took the chance, went across to the RCA, did 2 amazing years in London. RCA, as you know, is the only postgraduate college in the world, design college in the world, only postgraduate. So the people you meet from all over the world already have some experience because it's a postgraduate course. A lot of people come there after working for a few years, as did I. And this is where your training as a car designer really started. I learned a lot from my cohort, from my classmates, because lots of them came from a bachelor's in automotive design from Coventry University, from Pforzheim in Germany. I came from a diploma in product design, so I hadn't really drawn cars before. But you learn really fast, and again, this whole thing of questioning, learning, challenging yourself. This is where So by the end of the 2 years, I was probably as good as the rest of them who had already studied 4 years of car design in their bachelor's. 2002 wasn't a great year to graduate for some reason, but luckily I got a call from Mitsubishi Motors. That's the next one, and if you go to the next page, that's Tokyo on a Sunday. so very very different from Pontedera.
Very
Tokyo is of
interesting.
course. So stay on that slide, please. Tokyo is of course a 24/7 city. But funnily enough, to Pontedera, again, I couldn't speak any Japanese, and I was in the middle of this Shibuya crossing on Sunday, getting ready to go to work on Monday. So you can imagine what kind of fear and trepidation I was feeling. So anyway, I worked on many projects there. At that time, Mitsubishi was actually in a collaboration with Daimler Chrysler. So we had our design director was a gentleman called Olivier Boulet, who came from Mercedes and was running Mitsubishi as well. And keep going. So lots of funky little products. They are very big in 4x4. So this is a product they did for the Paris-Dakar race, which runs from Paris to Dakar in Senegal. The next picture will show you the actual car. We did very, very well in this race. Actually, Mitsubishi is very strong in rallying, as you all know. Carry on. Yeah. Then Mitsubishi and Daimler Chrysler split up, and my boss, Olivier Boulet, was going back to Mercedes-Benz, the studio in Yokohama, and he asked me to join him there. Would I say no? No, I said yes, as in many times before. Uprooted ourselves from Nagoya, moved to Yokohama, and started in this company. And it takes me back to that W128 I showed you right at the beginning of the presentation. The car that made me realize that there is car design as a profession. I was working for that brand, and the first day I joined the studio, there was a 90-page manual on how to design Mercedes-Benz. So this is the kind of history it had. But yeah, again, phenomenal projects. I was in the advanced design studio. We would work 6 or 7 years before a product was launched. It was more a visioning studio, they called it. Our work then went to Germany in Sindelfingen, and they would take it forward from there. We would really set up the proportions, the entire visual language of a new product. So this one was one of the first projects I worked on, the R172. It's called the SLK. The next picture will show it. While I designed, my proposal was obviously for the whole of the car. only the rear end got chosen, and someone else's front was chosen. But this happens. This happens in a design studio where there are 20 designers vying for the same project. So this will happen to you many times. But don't get disappointed. I mean, a nice backside is also worth putting into a product. It teaches you a lot. So that's why I don't show the front of this car. I show the back of this car. So some of the things I learned, as conditions for great design, I call this a wheel of great design. If you go to the next one, any of your students may want to take a screenshot of this. Actually, good design lies in the middle of 7 or 8 spokes. The first one is, of course, imagination. Second is society and culture, what's going on. We know what's going on today. Technology, marketing. Marketing is a very, very important function of design. We actually have a love-hate relationship with the marketing departments in our companies. But I think it's better to have a little more love towards them than hate. Suppliers, they have a huge role in what you are able to create. Function, of course. The product must function first before it does anything else. Legislation, legal conditions can determine what you design. And then, of course, environmental, considerations. So if you go next, one more. So this is where we are today, Tata Motors design. This is the world that we see around us, society and culture, technology, what's going on. I think a designer must must always look at these 8 spokes constantly. In fact, I have this picture, these 8 spokes on my softboard wherever I go, because I really see that, have we covered everything in what we are designing? Have we really? Of course, the importance of one to the other is different. Uh, but don't if you cover, or if you at least consider these 8 spokes, you can be reasonably sort of confident that your design will actually answer most of the issues around products today. They may not be the answer, but they will at least have considered many factors that you may have missed out. So if I just look at one, society and culture, when I made this slide, it was all becoming about shared everything, shared work, shared living, shared community, shared commuting. Now, we've been hit by COVID in the last 2 months. So when we emerge from this, will we have shared everything, or will people go back into their shells? That's the question. And it shows you that if you don't have your eye on what's happening in the society around you, when you do launch a product, you could be very quickly out of date or out of context. So keep your eye on these 8 spokes all the time. And whichever university I go to or I speak about, I always share this one image with them, and encourage the students to actually take a screenshot or whatever. Carry on. Yeah, so in the meanwhile, the way India works, where it works has changed. This is from anyone from Bombay will know. This is called Ministry of New. Couple of years ago, it was in the top 10 places to work in the world. This is 500 meters from our headquarters in Bombay, called Bombay House. And when I asked my colleagues, "Have you all been here?" none of them had even heard of it. So this is 500 meters away. So sometimes your job as a designer is also to open up the eyes of the rest of the organization. If you carry on, yeah, please, next. Where India eats. When I show these images to colleges and students around the world, they can't even imagine that India is turning into this. This could be London, it could be New York, it could be anywhere in the world. Of course, the next image shows our two great entry points into India, Delhi and Bombay. Next. Of course, the empty airports are probably what it looks like today. What India buys has also changed in the meanwhile. Carry on. This is how India expresses itself. This is work from an ex-NID sort of colleague of mine, Nipa Doshi. She lives and works in London. But how she's able to reflect the best of East and West actually in her line of furniture. It's called Doshi Levian Studio. I always use this example of how she's able to blend this, Eastern and Western sensibility. But this is, of course, the other reality of India. No, stay on that next slide. For anyone who's flown into Bombay, you know that picture on the right. This is what you fly over. When I show these pictures to students in the US or anywhere in Europe, they always wonder how the red car in the middle of that traffic jam ever gets out. And of course, I say that that road in Delhi on the left was designed to be 3 or 4 lanes, but you have 8 lanes of cars. So what does that mean for mobility? What does that mean for autonomous? People throw these words at you: autonomous, shared mobility, blah blah blah. What will autonomous do to that red car? I don't think there's any autonomous system in the world which will be able to deal with the complexity of India. Carry on. Next, please. Yeah, this is kind of, the red dot shows where we were as a brand when I joined the company. People were buying us. So we are in the bottom left, more or less. People were buying us for functional and utility reasons. This is why we got known as a taxi company. Because in taxis it's utility and function, and that's it. There's no real emotional or aspirational element. So when I joined, this is where we were. This is a very simple chart. I don't believe in complex charts. And my job was to basically move that red dot towards the top right hand corner. And that will show you basically the journey that I undertook as sort of head of design, and very lucky to be able to do that at Tata Motors. Next. So I, of course, didn't create a 90-page, Bible. I gave a very, very simple, I created one page for my entire design team, and I called it Impact Design. Why? Because I said, you must make immediate impact at first sight, and your product must have lasting impact over time. Why did I say that? I go back to this little thing. If you don't look good on that, in the first 7-8 seconds, people will swipe and go to the next story. Today, you got to win the war of design here. If you lose your customer here, he's not going to go to your showroom. So I said, the design of the cars and products we do must win the mind space or the mind share battle on this 5-inch screen. And only then will someone bother to come to your showroom. So that's where design became so important in the company. It sits today at the core of whatever we do, because you have to win the battle here. Next. So immediate impact was basically about exterior design, and lasting impact was about interior design. What we also had to do, this is sailing a ship while you build it. I created, 3 or 4 design studios globally. So one in the UK, that's the building on the right you see there, brand new actually. We were in another facility, but we just opened this last November. That's a brand new design studio. We have one in Turin in Italy, of course in Pune in India, and I've got a small office in South Korea with Tata Daewoo, primarily for commercial vehicles. So we were building these 3 studios as we were designing the cars, because no one waits for you to design cars while you're designing and building your team. So we went from 4 people in 2007-8 to 200 today. Next. So the last I checked, we had, like I said, about 200 people, 13 different nationalities, all the way from an American designer to Australians. It's very, very cool when you give an American designer the challenge to design a 4-meter car. They can't even think about how people will fit inside, but when they get into it, so they really come up with solutions you don't expect. So being challenged and challenging others as a head of design, if you ever have that opportunity, please challenge your team. Put unexpected people in unexpected projects. This big SUV that we designed, this was done by our Turin team. Some pickups we did them from the India team. So always challenge your designers, because I think in the most extreme of challenges will emerge the best, sort of most creative ideas. So of course, the level of skill is second to none. These are sort of hand sketches. We have a lot of physical work. The clay model, we touch, we look at every surface, we get into, we touch our materials, we feel what the customer will feel, what the customer will see, how the light will run on a car in the heat and summer of Delhi, or in the winter of in Kashmir. We look at all of this, how the colors will express themselves, all to get that impact that I spoke about. Next, please. Yeah, so this is, of course, cars through the years. We had many, many different cars, but if you see, the range was very scattered. There was no real design language. So that's what one work towards. Carry on. And yeah, that was the chance to do the Piaggio, the new generation Indica. So 20 years ago, when I saw it in Shivsagar Estate, I couldn't have imagined that me and the team would be designing the successor, or the let's say the progeny of that original car. This really changed our fate. Carry on. We did a Tigor, which is a compact sedan. We did an SUV called Hexa, and we did the Nexon. So all of this we did in the space of 3 years. With that growing team, with those growing studios, we spent many nights, in model shops, in various offices. Carry on. Next. Yeah, we of course also started working on electric cars, as you know. Next slide. This is very important to us. Affordable electric cars. A Tesla costs $80,000 today. A Tigor EV costs about 10 lakh rupees. So we wanted to make EVs accessible as well. And we were the first to do it. We didn't even know the market size actually. There was so little information on EVs that we didn't know the market size, and yet we went ahead and did that because that's the kind of company I think Tata Motors is. Next. And then I did another series called Impact 2.0. We really changed the game here. We took it up a notch. We got really involved in designing and in designing the new platforms. The previous cars were on older platforms, made to look new, and we had a great chance to do that as a design team. Next. Yeah, it'll come soon, the Altroz EV. Our target is to bring this under 10 lakh rupees. These are some of the sketches for that car. Carry on. You can just sort of go through these, and that's the car in the ICE version. We launched this in February in India and then got hit by COVID. Carry on. This is the 7-seat SUV. So all of this is under Impact 2.0. That once people have noticed you with Impact 1.0, in Impact 2.0, you raise the game. We are getting into newer segments. So again, small electric SUV. You can see the level of artwork that the designers are able to create. That's the first project we did in the new studio. There's the car which we showed in Geneva. Carry on. Yeah, so and we took part in Geneva in last year with 5 all new cars. The design team actually designed the stand itself as well. So design should go, if you are able to, as a designer in the organization. I'm really lucky to be able to do that in Tata Motors. You should spread to everything that your customer will see and touch and even hear of your company. And we are very fortunate as a design team that we've been able to force ourselves into this function. That's why I said have a little bit of a love relationship with marketing, because usually marketing departments do this and they create a completely different story. But if you want consistency, get into that activity. So we designed the entire stand, everything, the colors, the fonts, the text, the patterns, and the cars themselves. Carry on. And then slowly, yeah, one more. Slowly our dots started sort of moving, So Impact 1 took us kind of in a neutral zone. People were just about talking about us in their dinner table conversations. Oh, have you noticed Tata Motors? One thing is clear: if you aren't in the top 3, consideration set, whatever you do, colleges, products, services, you have to be in the top 3. If you're not in the top 3 of mind space and mind share, you might as well not be there. If you're 4th or 5th or 7th, it doesn't matter. You're not in the top 3 consideration set, you will not be bought, sold, used, etc. So our job was to get us into that top 3 consideration set. Carry on. Please carry on. And then very recently, we revived a very historical brand name, the Sierra, but we completely revamped it and brought it in a new avatar. So Sierra for the new era. It was born electric. None of that big diesel engine of the previous one. There was a lot of love for the Sierra. So we brought back the nameplate in this concept car. Carry on. Yeah, beautiful interior. You see there's a bit of digital detox. There's no huge screens. It's a very calming space to be. We in fact even put some moss, on the dashboard. Those are little planted moss, real. A lounge-like sofa, to make this whole travel experience very sort of calming. not to be overpowered by big digital screens and internet inside and God knows what else, this was a space you would detoxify digitally. Carry on.
So, few days, Siena of the writing, it was itself a revolution in a car, and had all that glamour and what you're saying about, the overall look, the overall architecture, that was very masculine, and of course it had its own aspirational value attached. So, what was the driving force behind this electric version of New Sierra? What you rightly said, that New Sierra for the new era, or a legend is reborn. Should we say that?
Yeah. So, Manika, as the world has changed, obviously the customer himself or herself has changed.
Yeah.
And if we were to do a Sierra with a 2.5 liter diesel engine, I don't think it would be relevant for today and beyond.
True.
So that's why we made a conscious choice that yes, we are going to bring this as an electric vehicle first. Because the world around us has changed, expectations have changed. And, the spirit of the original Sierra was what you just said, glamorous, pioneering. We wanted to maintain the spirit, but not to be slave to the previous gen product. Absolutely. So that's why I said the understanding of history is very important to know where you want to go next.
And then you can contemporize as per the new challenges.
Yeah, exactly. Carry on. Yeah. So Impact 2.0 has moved the dot a little further to the right. Commercial vehicles, we also do. We've got lots of different types of commercial vehicles. Again, when I saw the range, it was crazy. We had some trucks which we are still making, which were 30 years old, and some, we just launched a few years ago. How do you unify that range? I'll talk very quickly through it next. These are some of the newer ones, but very disjointed design language, So next. So I did a very quick short-term thing, gave it a little bit of a philosophy, like design for passenger cars. I launched what's called Premium Tough for commercials and carry on. We have a device we call the Trust Bar. The commercial vehicles are known for, Tata commercial vehicles are known for trust. They will never let you down if it's a bus or a van or whatever it is. Carry on. Yeah, and you can see we started at least initially applying it to the fascias of our products, all the way from a 1-ton payload, what we call the Intra, that was called the Edge as the design. But, the 45-ton primer and the electric buses, how do you unify the range? So we came up with this very simple visual device, in the short term. And then, of course, we design, the entire product as we go along. Carry on. There you see, we use the same passenger vehicle team and to design this little product called the Intra. So you can see the touches. These were two separate teams when I joined the company. We didn't talk to each other. So commercial vehicles did their own thing, passenger car design did their own thing, and there was no cross-learning. And the first thing I did was literally break the wall that was in the studio between the two halves. So physically broke the wall and mixed up the teams. And again, you get surprised by the outcome. When passenger car designers start designing a little truck, they have that mentality, customer centric. We brought in fabrics, we brought in air conditioning for the first time in the segment. Never happened before. People don't even consider the comfort of a truck driver. And today in India, we have a huge problem about availability. So 20% of trucks in India cannot find a driver, and it'll only get worse. Carry on. So that's the truck we launched last December. The little Intra does very well, has gone straight to become the segment leader. Sometimes there are battles you have to fight in the company as well. I wanted to bring the body color into the truck, so the air conditioning vents. I wanted to give that touch of the exterior design, like we did in Piaggio. A lot of the cost engineering guys said, no, it'll be too much, the customer won't pay, blah, blah, blah. But we still went ahead and did it, and this version sells the most in the entire range. Carry on. Yeah, these are the other little products we do in EVs as well, in commercial vehicles. Yeah, carry on. Yeah, and I end with these 2 or 3 slides. I'm quite active on social media, as you know, and almost every day we get pictures like this, and this is what actually gets me out of bed. The moment that someone is 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 taking the key to his or her car, because a car is much more than this inanimate object. Most people will give their car a name. Have you heard of a washing machine with a name? No. Or a toaster. But car is one of those inanimate objects which really has the power to move you emotionally and physically. And I love it when people send us selfies of their cars. And even in this picture, you can see how many places the car has gone. Himalayas to the desert, and especially the one with that little 3-year-old girl who's hugging the Nexon. It really shows you that somewhere our efforts are sort of working. There's Pradumna with his to his Tiago. It was one of my proudest moments. It was one of my proudest moments in my career as a designer, when your own teacher actually buys your product. And I end with the last slide. This is not from a marketing campaign. This is, and that's why I've kept the name of the guy there. This is a guy called Kedar who actually sent me this picture of him kissing his Tiago. And if you are able to make customers fall in love with your product or service, whatever it is, whatever you do, then I think you've done your job as a designer. So yeah, I sort of stop there. This is where we are. So yeah.
Indeed, a different kind of joy, seeing all this, and the kind of hard work. It's like all paid very well with these kind of outputs you get, and the emotional connects with the masses across the globe. So thank you for this, Pratap. And taking it forward, though we've heard about the new design language and impact design 2.0, the question which is again coming is in the context of material, the lightweighting, the proportions, the visual strength. So what you call it as alpha platforms. So can you share a little more light into what are these alpha platforms?
Yeah, alpha platform is it's actually a product architecture.
Yeah.
I showed you the range of our older cars. Each one was done on a separate architecture, and that cost us a lot of time and money and effort, etc. So we said, the things that the customer cannot see, we should commonize into an architecture, and the things that differentiate one product from the other, we should actually design. So if it's an SUV or a hatchback or a sedan, what the customer can see and touch should be different. But underneath, that means the backbone of the product should be common, because that's where you have huge supply chain efficiencies. You can talk to a supplier and say, look, I want to buy 300,000 of your component, instead of saying 15,000 for a hatchback, and then you go to someone else. So it helps you as a company leverage efficiency when you go to an architecture concept. And on top of that, the top hat, what we call it, we can do those much faster. So today, typically, we can do a new car in 36 months. So, this used to be 60 months earlier. So we've taken 2 years off the design development process, which is incredible, and we've been able to do that because of architecture. You come to weight. Weight is a huge consideration. The materials we use a lot of high strength steel, which are stronger but lighter. We can't, of course, use exotic materials like carbon fiber, aluminium, because then it would make your car unaffordable in the segments we operate. But every gram we are able to shave off is something we pursue. Aerodynamics, it has a huge impact on fuel economy. And with new regulations coming, what we call CAFE, which is combined average fleet economy, that means every car your company puts out has to then come under a certain grams per kilometer of CO2. And this regulation is going to hit us very, very soon in India, and I'm glad it will, because it will clean up the environment. BS6, we just transitioned to Bharat Stage 6 fuel and emissions. No country in the world has done that. From 4 to 6. We skipped 5. Most countries go to 3, 4, 5, but we went from 4 to 6, and that's a huge thing the industry did. So, again, going back to my wheel, society, legislation, all of that has a massive influence in what we do.
Absolutely. And there you are, highly successful in cracking all the challenges. So there's this interesting question, Pratap, which is coming up, that is Tata Motors thinking of venturing into two-wheelers? And how artificial intelligence will be helpful in this?
We aren't venturing into two-wheelers. I think there's huge players already in the field. So it's as important to decide what not to do as it is to decide what to do. When we enter a market segment, it's always for two reasons. One is the market segment growing? And secondly, when you go into that segment or that market, are you able to make a meaningful change in that segment? Are you able to really redefine it in some way, bring something new? Otherwise, we don't enter markets, or segments. So, for example, a lot of people ask me, are you going to do a full-size sedan? Sedans of a particular size, only 10,000, 12,000 sell in India. It's not a market for us. I rather do a smaller car, which has more potential. So we use those two criteria. Can we do something new? Can we get to that number 1 or 2 in that segment? Because I told you, if you're number 4, you're not considered. So you have to be a strong player in the segment, do something to the segment, and the segment has to be a growing one in the first place.
Yeah, it's exactly what you said, that it's all about the mind share, and then you get into the market share. So understanding that you have your design teams running in 3 different countries, and design is all about collaboration. So how difficult and how challenging it is in this lockdown period when you have your team sitting in India and Italy and of course in the UK. How do you collaborate? Is it only through digitalization? How difficult is it, when you say that you are working in and out?
We use Teams, Microsoft Teams a lot now. We didn't even know that the software existed 5 weeks ago. And, today we are on Teams calls basically throughout the day. So it helps you sort of stay in touch.
Yeah.
We are going through a phase of products which are now at the digital stage. So it's easy for us to share images and, evaluate. But we'll very soon be moving into the physical design of those products, clays and whatever have you. And we are all hoping that the lockdown ends soon, because all 3 countries are locked down. In fact, the world is locked down. So, we are hoping that in the next sort of 4 to 6 weeks, places of work open up, and we are able to take those products or projects into that physical phase. But for the moment, the timing has, kind of worked for us. But yes, it's never easy, because sometimes when you're rotating a digital model on the screen, it'll get stuck, or the lighting is not great, or someone will have Wi-Fi issues.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So those are sort of annoyances that we're dealing with. But the biggest one, Monica, is even though we can speak to each other every day, I think there's something about a physical dynamic which you cannot you sort of take away. When 3 or 4 of you,
that morning cup of tea with the team, of course.
Yes, when 3 of you are sort of standing and looking at a model, ideas, you have a little bit of banter, chat. It's those unplanned moments that actually, don't happen when you're digital. So.
True. And again, Pratap, these days we see a lot of things coming from gaming and animation and the movie world to be like those avatars, what you just mentioned. Do they have any influence when we come to designing of the automobile sector? Do they influence? Because we are actually onto the virtual platforms. So do they carry a little percentage of influence towards designing a car, or?
Not how a car physically looks, let's say, but we use a lot of tools from gaming, Monica, actually to in our design process now. Because 3D rendering and 3D modeling in the gaming world has really moved on. The models are digitally lighter actually. So they're faster to render. You have much better visual effects that you can create. I didn't show them today. We make a lot of studio animations to actually sell our concept to the management. I never show them a model in the first go. I will always show them a story, a movie, and we actually use these technologies. Therefore, so the visualization we do in our studio is very, very high quality because of these new tools. So yes, they're part of the process. There's no doubt about it.
So there's this another question, which is a technical question for my understanding. It says, is BS6 a safer for cars for coming days rather than BS4?
It's not safer, it's cleaner. BS6 is an environmental regulation for exhaust emissions,
right?
Especially NOx.
Okay.
So the particulate filters, etc. So the on the emission side, it's much better.
Much better.
Secondly, we have what you call global NCAP. This is a global new car protocol for safety. Most of our cars are 5-star. That's the highest you can go, even though the regulations in India are at a much lower level currently. Even pedestrian protection. So, a lot of people think of crashes and what happens to the car and the occupants. Very little thought is given to the pedestrian, and all our new cars are actually pedestrian protected as well, even before the regulation has come. The regulation will come in October, and we launch these cars in January. So they're all PED-Pro compliant.
Yeah, so automotive industry is transforming rapidly, and autonomous driving, what Pratap has just touched, connectivity, electrification are paving its own way from these new forms of mobility. So here, this was the carman Pratap Bose connecting with us all the way from the UK, sharing a lot of new learning and insightful journey of automobile industry, which is a rapidly evolving sector where digitalization, connectivity, and social trends related to the environment, taxes, legislations, etc., are few challenges. And we have some creative people like Pratap who successfully find the right balance between digital innovation and social reality. So thank you, Pratap, for this insightful and very enriching session. I see a lot of students who must have benefited, and we tried answering the maximum questions. We went live on the social media of Rishihood handles. So thank you so much for being here and sparing your precious time with Rishihood University. Thank you, and thank you, audience, for being on this platform. And we tried answering majority of the questions, but we are running out of time, so we'll definitely connect back very soon. Thank you, Pratap.
Thank you very much. Thanks everyone for your time and patience, and of course, listening to me sort of drone on for a bit. So thanks, Manika. Thanks to your team as well. Thank you for having me. All the best.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yes, you too. Bye-bye. Bye.
Thank you.